So, Earth Season Rift is here. New boss, new devices, new Rift dedicated here that makes this thing way easier. As mentioned in the Meruin mail, they did make this a lot easier. At RC2, I'm already two-shotting, and I've heard people say that they're one-shotting at RC8. That's pretty insane compared to what it was last time, where I think if you were on a fast track, you were two-shotting at RC8 or 15. Yeah, you were two-shotting at RC8 and then one-shotting at RC15 if you had really good gear. I'm doing this on an alt with not great gear, and I'm already two-shotting at RC8. So anybody with not fantastic gear is probably going to have that to look forward to. Since they did nerf it, I don't think Wukong's actually mandatory. I think once you hit RC21, you're going to be able to one-shot. But if you want to one-shot a lot earlier, or just not have to think about it as much, Wukong's a solid pickup. Okay, so now let's quickly go over some of the mechanics of the fight. I'm not going to go over absolutely all of it, because it's not really necessary, just the important stuff. Daydream Joker doesn't work, since it's immune to proportional to max HP damage. Pen set doesn't work, so use crit set or torrent set. The main goal of the fight is to spam AoEs to remove these abyssal tentacles, to decrease its damage dealt and also increase its damage taken. Eventually you'll end up with 9, so it'll take 270% extra damage. Also, this thing is kind of important. The boss instantly takes a turn at the start of combat, like in Hall of Trials, and it'll use this skill. So you're going to want a cleanser to move first to get rid of all these debuffs, or use immunity set. There's also a device later on which just blocks this completely. One thing is the boss has no strip anywhere in its kit nor on the skill, so once you have your immunity buff up past the first turn, if you maintain it, you're pretty much safe from the skill completely. Also, Fighting Spirit can't be used here, and every 5 times you hit it, it'll use a counter, which doesn't do any damage. It's actually good for you because it increases the debuff durations of the caster, and the S3 decreases debuff durations by 1 turn. This mainly comes into effect at RC8, because once you hit RC8 with one of the devices, you can start permanently maintaining Death Break and Severs on it, but up until then it's not that important. With all of the standard teams that are shown, you're not going to really have to worry about these mechanics if you're following instructions. Okay, so one of the nice things they did is they made Rift start the first time you do it at 25% HP. This lets you get past RC1 or Rift Controller level 1 and go to 2 very quickly, where you get your first device, which will help a lot with doing more damage or staying sustained. So after you pick your 4 sets, you get a quick tutorial while Operator Cigarette mentions that they made it easier for you. After you get this tutorial real quick, you're going to want to first select your pet. There are dedicated Rift pets that you're going to need. The 2 most important skills are the equipment upon defeating the boss and the charm upon defeating the boss. After you get those 2, there's 2 different pet skills for you to get. One is the double Rift Energy and Season Score. This is the one I prefer, because the other one is a chance at reforging materials, which I don't value too much, but that's also partially because I have a large stock from doing expeditions and hunts before. A lot of people are opting to make a second Rift pet with a full SSS. I'm currently missing the charm for that, so you're going to want to try to keep 2 of the charm and equipment S skills for Rift in case you want to make a second Rift pet with the Reforged materials for you to swap out when you hit RC21 later. First up, let's take a look at the general best team. Ray over Bernard is an upgrade, but I don't have Ray on this account, and Bernard works well enough while being much less costly to build. Also, since I'm doing this on an alt, all of my gear is pretty horrendous, nowhere close near where I'd want these units to be at. But hey, it's good enough. First up, let's start with Wukong. For Mola's, just this S1 and S2 maxed are fine. We'd run him skills off, so S3 isn't needed, but if you want to use him in PvP, then you probably need to Mola his S3. For build, Rage or Destruction both work, whichever one does more damage for you. Rage's effectiveness is going to vary a bit depending on which devices you pick. You're just going to want to see which one does more for you. Also, depending on your healer, you might need a bit of bulk, and bulk is probably a bit easier for you to get on Destruction since people don't really roll for defense or HP on Rage. For the 2-piece set, you're going to want either crit set, torrent, or if you're using Idol's Cheer on your support or on your healer and it's pushing your Wukong past your healer, you're probably going to want immunity set so he doesn't venom himself. You do want 100% crit chance. The boss is not Ice Element. I'm just using a crit boosting artifact on my support, so I hit 100 with that. For the bulk thing that I mentioned, my healer has no healing artifact, so I need to be able to tank a crushing S1 and S2 at the start of the fight, after which my run stabilizes because of Sigurd's Scythe, but this bulk gives me just enough to do that. Sigurd's Scythe is the artifact of choice, so you can heal up after the boss gets you low. You could also use Golden Rose. This is only mandatory at RC1. Once you hit RC2, there's a healing device that you could use, which lets you swap this out for either our Beautiful Seasons or Victorious Flag, Symbol of Unity, some sort of damage dealing artifact. If you choose not to use the healing device and use the damage boosting device instead, then you do still need Sigurd's. And next up, let's take a look at Vivian, who is supposed to be a free unit, so people are supposed to have her, but a lot of people seem to be missing her for some reason. For Mola's, S3 is really nice, so she can get attack buff and immunity buff up more often. S2 isn't mandatory. I have these Mola'd from Banshee 13 one-shot, and extra damage is nice, especially since the cooldown for this is only 2 turns and the mods are pretty high, but it's not mandatory by any means. For EE, you want the S3 50% CR push to help her cycle more. And for a general build, again 100% crit chance, mine's boosted by an artifact. You want her speed decently high so she can cycle the buffs more and use more AoEs. You want to make sure that she goes second though, so if your healer, which needs to go first, is capped at a certain speed, make sure to slow down your Vivian enough so that she goes second, and the rest of the stats go into damage. For artifact, I think there's 3 choices generally. There's Call Aldra, which is the most consistent damage boost. There's also Spirit's Breath, which is inconsistent until max limit break, but at max limit break it improves her cycling, so she uses 1 less S1 in between each S3. And then there's the middle version, which is Etika Scepter, which makes you S2 more often, but I'm not too fond of it because the procs are RNG and sometimes you'll S3 like 2 turns early, sometimes you won't even proc it at all. Okay, so let's take a quick look at Etika Scepter. At plus 15, you've got a 38% chance to decrease cooldowns by 1 at the beginning of the turn. If you proc it, this lets you S2 every turn, since S2 is only a 2-turn cooldown, which drops to 1, and S3 will drop from a 5-turn cooldown to a 4-turn cooldown. Since you have a 5-turn cooldown, this means you have 4 turns to proc Etika Scepter before it doesn't really do anything. And if we pull up the calculator real quick, you have a 0.38% chance to proc, so that's a 0.62% chance to not proc it, and the odds of not procking it 4 times in a row are, oh no, it's almost 15%. So you've got about a 15% chance to not proc your plus 15 Etika Scepter over 4 turns. For her sets, since you're going so fast, you're going to want speed set, and 2-piece set can be crit chance or torrent. Next up, we've got Bellona. For Mola's, I just Mola'd her S3 to get the max death break chance. You can max her S2 and S3 if you want, since these are her 2 AoEs. I might do it later, but for now, this is what I've got going. For EE, you want to reduce her S2 cooldown. This reduces it to 2 turns, so she'll use it every other turn. And then for her build, I found that about 190 speed makes it so she doesn't get... So you want Rift to move before Bellona does, so then when Bellona uses S3 on the first turn, you won't instantly lose 1 turn when Rift moves. About 190 speed is where the Kraken will move first. I'm not sure if this is like within speed RNG range. If you get speed RNG, you just need to lower it a little bit, but 190 is what's worked fine for me. Effectiveness, you need 105. I'm using the new pizza artifact, so I get 10% effectiveness from that. But 105 is what you need. Same with the crit chance, you want to be at 100. And then the rest of the stats go into damage. For sets, since you're running her pretty slow, Destruction's probably better, but no Destruction gear on this account, speed set it is. And for 2-piece sets, either crit chance or torrent. Artifact, if your healer is scuffed like mine, you might need Bloodstone to sustain up. If you don't, then you can use Iron Fan for cycling, or you can use Damage Artifact. Oh yeah, lastly, a final warning for Bellona, do not use Song of Stars. The Song of Stars gives you a 15% damage boost, and Sever gives you a 30% damage boost. 15 is less than 30. It's just going to decrease your damage overall because it's going to prevent you from applying another stack of Sever when you hit the debuff cap. Also, one thing to note is that depending on how much damage your team does, you can opt to just drop the effectiveness completely and go more damage, because if you do enough damage, there's a chance that at RC 2 you'll be able to consistently 2-shot even without Death Break, and at RC 8 you can 1-shot without Death Break if your units are good enough. Last up, we've got our Healer Cleanser. Ray's a much better option than Bernard. Both of them work at level 50. All you really need for the enhancements is the cooldown on S3. And then for gear, you don't need any effect resistance since Wukong's the front line, and you pretty much have immunity buff up at all times anyways. You just want to make sure that they move first, and then the rest of it goes into HP for more healing. And for artifact, you can use a stat boosting artifact, like, what is this even called? Midnight Pizza Delivery, Midnight Bloom, or Warhorn all work fine. Or you can use a healing artifact if you need, like Touch of Rekos, or what is the Diane one? Unfading Memories, or Celestine, since Bernard's S1ing pretty often. For Ray, you might want to use Rod instead, since he's skilling more than he's using a non-attack skill more than he's using his basic attack. For sets, you're going to want at least speed set, since he needs to move first, so he's going to have to be pretty fast. After that, the best set's probably immunity set, so you can block the first 2 Venom applications. Since he's the cleanser and he takes the first turn, he's eating the first 2 Venoms with no real way to get rid of them. Immunity set would block this, since the boss doesn't have a strip on its S2. If you don't have that, HP set, or really just whatever set makes you fast enough to take turn 1 is good enough. You're going to want to get through your RC1 run quickly. I'm going to play this at 2x speed since there's not too much to mention. It's only at 25% HP thanks to the new nerf they did to RC1s. You can quickly get your device. I don't even land defense break here, but I still managed to kill it easily. The only thing you want to keep in mind is you need to make sure that you don't die. A healing artifact for Wukong is going to be enough for him to survive if you have enough bulk, like I mentioned during the stats section. So after you've hit RC2 off the very easy first run, you get a lot of devices to choose from overall. On the first row, the only 2 ones worth looking at are this one, the Abundance one, which makes it so that when your Wukong takes his turns, he's pretty much going to full heal your entire team, and you're not going to need any sort of healing artifacts anymore. On the other hand, if you do have healing artifacts, you could use this one instead, which I think is much better. It increases damage dealt by 30%. That's more than any artifact or any damage artifact is going to give you. So if possible, you want to try to use this one. On the next row, you've got this one, a Thief one, a Mage one, and a Warrior one. The Warrior one is the best one if you have Wukong. 2 debuff extensions every 3 turns is going to be good enough for you to permanently maintain Death Break. And if you aren't using Wukong, this one's probably the best one, because it'll let your Vivian S2 every single turn and give her a bit more bulk as well. On the row after that, another Warrior one, a Thief one, and a Knight one. The best one, if you have Wukong, is going to be the Warrior one. He's already the vast majority of our damage, so any sort of damage dealt increase, especially proportional debuffs, where after you get this extension device, you're going to be at 10 debuffs pretty often. He's going to do a lot more damage. A good backup one if you're not using Wukong might be the Thief one or the Knight one. If you're using Mort as your Knight, this one's probably going to be solid. Otherwise, if you're using a Thief like Verdant Nadin maybe, this one's going to be nice to help inflict Sever since she only has 1 AoE. On the last row, you have this one. It's a immunity device, which basically removes this combined with this healing one. Pretty much removes any sort of need you have for a Soul Weaver, and you can drop your Soul Weaver for an extra DPS slot. Good recommendations are stuff like Verdant Nadin or anything with 100% Death Break. I think Ram would also be good, even though she doesn't have any AoEs, it's extra 100% Death Break. You also have this one, a Ranger, that extends debuff durations. This one, for your Bellona, pretty much makes it so that once you land Death Break, it's going to be there forever, and all of the Severs are going to be there forever too. It's a bit redundant with this Warrior one, but if you're not using a Warrior, then this one's going to be pretty solid. And then there's the Rift Counterforce. It gives you 5 extra turns, but I think the damage increase you'll get from going this one or this one is going to be much better than whatever you'll get from 5 Counterforce. Once you've cleared your initial RC1 run and you hit RC2, you're going to want to come over here and grab one of these 2 devices. As mentioned during the stats section, the damage boosting one is optimal. However, it's going to require that you have a healing artifact on Wukong and potentially a healing artifact on Bellona if your Ray or Bernard isn't very good. If you do need the healing, then just run this one and swap your Wukong and Bellona over to damaged artifacts instead. Now, I'll quickly show you the RC2 team. And this is going to be pretty much the same team that you're going to use from RC2 all the way through to RC8.
금단의 마법이여 모두 파괴하라. 피날레를 장식해라. 시전 완료.
오합 시조리고
전 지루한 건 싫답니다.
얘는 배로 주입해야지.
자, 어디서 감히? 이제야 싸우는 것 같네요.
오합 시조리고 금방 끝내드릴게요.
이거는 어때요? 구름에 응답하라. 아멸이여!
오합 시조리고
후회하실 겁니다.
얘는 배로 주입해야지.
너?
조심하세요. 오합 시조리고
더 버텨주실 수 있죠? 시전 완료.
So this was a mistake. I yielded the run here because I didn't want to progress the damage bar, so I could keep on testing comps. In hindsight, I should have let it just finish so I could see the percentage damage dealt or HP remaining and just yield 3 times to reset the run. So I'm gonna have to just try to guess about how much damage I did. Based off the HP bar here, I did about 66% of his HP, so there's about like 33 to 34% of his HP left, which is pretty solid for an RC2 run. I think if I land the first death break on either the first or second run, I 2-tap it, or otherwise I 3-tap. So this is definitely much easier than last Rift. Okay, so let's take some look at some alternatives. For Bellona, the best alternative is probably VAdin. VAdin is a free unit, but some of you might be on Savior Adin. You do get 2 free swaps back to VAdin and back to Savior, and hopefully you only have to do it once, but I will go over a different alternative later. I don't have her SSS because I didn't finish story on this account yet. One thing to note is that in her skill tree, there is this rune here, which increases crit chance of all allies by 7%. So this does let you drop her the crit chance on your team a little bit if you need to. Also, this rune decreases the cooldown of her S3 when she crits. So this is actually a 3-turn cooldown and not a 4-turn cooldown. Adin's got pretty good uptime on her personal buff weakness shared. It's up every 2 out of 3 turns, and she's 100% death break at the start. Doesn't have much AoE, it's just her S2, but the weakness shared damage boost makes up for it decently well. I think at later Rift levels, once you're able to consistently maintain death break, Bellona's gonna be a lot better, but at least at RC2, VAdin does perfectly fine. For her build, you want to be a similar speed to Bellona, about 190 speed, so that Rift moves first. And also, crit chance, you want to be at least 93, since she gets 7 from her rune tree, and I'm getting a 10 bonus, so I can be as low as 83. Effectiveness, you want to be at least 105, I'm getting plus 10, so I'm 1 effectiveness off, but constrained by gear, what can you do? Artifact, just use a damage boosting artifact. One more thing for add-in is that since we don't have Bloodstone healing, if your healer's a little bit scuffed like mine, you're going to want to make sure that you're using the warrior healing device instead. And this also lets us swap his artifact from Sigurd's over to a damage artifact like our Beautiful Seasons, Victorious Flag, or Symbol of Unity.
조심하세요.
금단의 마법이여 모두 파괴하라.
오합 기절이고
어디 보는 거야? 여기라고 여기. 어디서 감히? 피할 수 없을까? 차!
오합 기절이고
시전 완료.
예의는 배로 주입해야지.
위험할 뿐.
너? 각오하라고. 필살의 일격이니까.
오합 기절이고
구름에 응답하라. 아무려. 꽤 아플 거야. 후회하실 겁니다.
오합 기절이고
조심하세요.
예의는 배로 주입해야지.
어디서 감히?
The VAdin run ended doing about 62-63% of the boss's HP, so there's about 37% left. This is pretty close to the Bellona one, not that far off, but I think this is mostly because when the boss used its S3 and cleansed the Death Break off, Adin used S3 right away and immediately applied Death Break again, whereas Bellona didn't Death Break until pretty much the very end. I think at higher RCs, such as at RC8, when you can permanently keep Death Break on, Bellona's going to start doing a lot more damage than Adin. Also, if you ever hit the point where you just don't need Death Break to kill anymore, then the Bellona is also going to be much more valuable there because she does more damage overall. For replacement though, Adin does a pretty good job since she gets pretty close in damage even if it's reliant on a few conditions. If you don't want to use Verdant Adin or swap her back from Savior Adin, a decent alternative is Mercenary Helga. I'm personally not too fond of this one. I don't think it does that well. And you do get 2 free swaps over to Earth Adin, so I'd just swap over if you don't want to roll Bellona. Helga's build is pretty much the same. Since she uses her S3 first and not her S2, you don't have to worry about her speed. You can make her a lot faster if you want to. I just do not have the gear. I'm also 1 crit chance off. Don't have the reforged materials to reforge this chest to hit 90%. It is what it is. Artifact, damage artifact. And you also want to hit 105 effectiveness, but I get 10 from the Midnight Pizza artifact. I rest the stats into damage. Generally, I'd say Helga's way worse because her S2 only has a 80% Death Break chance, 20 from the skill tree plus 60 base, compared to Adin and Bellona's 100% Death Break chance. Her S1 also has a 55% Death Break chance, but you cap out at debuffs early pretty quickly. After the boss uses S3, a lot of the severs wear off and you get a chance to apply Death Break again. Her CR push can be useful when Wukong's not restricted, but aside from that, overall, she's much weaker than VAdin or Bellona.
금방 끝내드릴게요.
절제된 힘을 예방한다. 서운해하지 말라고. 의뢰일 뿐이니까. 시전 완료. 만만히 보지 말라고.
오합 기절이고
너?
얘는 배로 주입해야지.
자, 어디서 감히?
위험할 뿐이에요.
오합 기절이고
실력을 보여주지.
자,
얘는 배로 주입해야지.
구름에 응답하라. 감염력. 시시한 녀석. 이제 끝내주마. 후회하실 겁니다. 두들겨 패주마.
오합 기절이고
차.
조심하세요.
The Helga team ended up doing about 47.5% of the boss's HP, so there's about 52.5% remaining. This means that it's not going to 2-tap at RC2. It might 2-tap at later RCs, but this did have pretty good RNG since I landed the very first F break. At higher RCs, obviously, once you hit RC8 and higher, this is easily going to transition into a quick 2-tap. And considering this is our third option, going past the first two ones, which were pretty good, getting a consistent 2-tap and probably a 1-tap by RC21 ain't bad. Okay, so looking at a Wukong alternative instead, since a lot of people might not want to roll a unit just for Rift, especially in between a bunch of limiteds. The two best alternatives I've seen so far are Mort and Armin, neither of which are particularly fantastic in my opinion, but it is what it is. Armin, you just want to build full tank. You can build her counter if your gear allows for it. This account does not have gear. I'm using 2 HP percent right sides, even though I think def percent is better, because with a lower HP pool, that's less HP for your Bellona's Bloodstone and your healers, whatever healing to heal. So defense is much more effective in my opinion, even with the def pen. And you want to be on Arius in my opinion, because since there's no self-healing from Sigurds or anything, your other units are going to be taking a lot more damage, or rather they're not going to be getting as much healing since a lot of the healing is going to be funneled into Armin. So Arius helps a lot with reducing their damage taken. EE doesn't really matter. I took this one because it was the first one I crafted, but this is also probably the best one. Since we have no warriors in this team, you're going to want to make sure that you're not using the warrior healing device and you're using the AoE damage increase device instead.
조심하세요.
절제된 힘을 예방한다. 더 버텨주실 수 있죠? 사단의 방패! 어디서 감히?
자,
절 재밌게 해주세요. 차! 그냥 나! 차! 시전 완료. 헛? 피날레를 장식해볼까?
금방 끝내기로 해.
너. 자, 조심하세요. 구름에 응답하라. 암열려. 후회하실 겁니다. 차. 차.
위험할 텐데.
더 버텨주실 수 있죠? 어디서 감히 자, 가자! 의지의 힘을! 가볼까요?
The Armin team ends with us doing about 39% of the boss's HP, so there's around 61% of the boss's HP left. This is just barely over the range for a consistent 3-tap, or about as consistent as you can get while relying on a death break. Do keep in mind I'm using some pretty scuffed gear, especially on Armin. If you have Armin on counter set, that would be way better. I do not have counter gear, so she's not contributing anything to this fight really. Her AoEs could help you stack more severs, which would let you do more damage as well, and better gear on Bellona and Vivian would help as well. A 3-tap at RC2 is still pretty solid all things considered, because you'd probably start 2-tapping by RC8, and maybe 1-tapping by RC15 or even earlier. Also, considering that we replaced the best unit out of the 4 for Rift, being able to at least 3-tap isn't too bad. So yeah, that's that. I'm still at RC2 because I spent the entire day just testing different comms and looking at other things. There's a lot of hidden mechanics in Rift that don't really matter too much, but I might make a video on it later just because they're fun to talk about. I'm probably going to rush RC21 on my alt over the next day or two, depending on how much work I have to do. Once I hit RC21, I'll put out a video going over any changes that you have to or want to make at RC8 and 15 as you unlock new devices. I'm hoping or thinking that at RC21, once you're able to drop your Soul Weaver, you might be able to one-shot without using Death Break, but we'll have to see how that goes. Until then, good luck with Rift.